Okay, time to look at layers. If you've ever worked in art programs that use layers like Photoshop, Paint.net, GIMP, or Sprite, it's the same thing in Platform Builder. If you haven't worked with layers before, no worries, that's what this tutorial is about. As you play around with Platform Builder, you'll notice that some things appear over others. For example, in this overworld, we can put down some water. If I draw a bridge, it appears above the water. If I place grass edges, they will appear above the water, but under the bridge. And if I drop down a character, my character appears above all of it. Platform Builder knows to do it this way because of layers. Every item you place is on a layer. By default, Platform Builder automatically selects which layer to use when you place an item. Items on higher layers appear above items placed on lower layers. So, when you place water, it gets placed on a low layer. When you place a character, it goes on a high layer. To help you see this, I'm going to click the View icon and enable Show Layer Information. Now, at the top, it says Layer, automatically select, and then the name of the layer, Auto 3, Characters and Solids. So I can see that when I place a character, it gets placed on this layer called Auto 3. If I go back to water, it's now Auto 10, Ground and Water. Does this mean the ground pieces go on the same layer as the water pieces? Yes, it does. By default, ground and water share the same layer in the overworld. That's why the layer is named that way. That's also why you can't place more than one in the same space unless you enable the free tool. I don't recommend that though, since there's no guarantee which one will appear on top. Now, Platform Builder allows you to mess around with all this layer stuff, and you do it through the Layer tool. When I open that up, I get the familiar view of a manager, but it's already populated with 10 layers. Here's the names again, like Characters and Solids, Ground and Water. Remember how I said that higher layers appear above other layers? Right, that is why Characters and Solids is higher than Ground and Water. If I move Characters and Solids below Ground and Water, then my character is under the water. It's because everything is always on a layer, and I moved the layer with my character below the layer with my water. So yes, the layer manager is the only manager in Platform Builder where order matters. That's why, by default, these layers are numbered 1 through 10. It shows you the default and recommended order. And yes, I know it can be confusing that the higher the number, the lower the layer, but that's how programming works sometimes. You can think of it like depth. The higher the number, the greater the depth, and so the lower it is. Now, let's say I have this dirt ground, and I want it to appear above the water. By default, ground and water are on the same layer. But if I go back to the layer manager, I can choose to work on a higher layer for the ground. Let's just do Auto 8. Now I can draw over the water and the ground edges with my ground tile. Notice that it no longer says the layer is automatically selected at the top because we've manually selected a layer to work on. That layer will remain the selected layer no matter what item I choose to work with. Notice also that my placement box looks different and the layer icon is lit up. They're just ways of Platform Builder telling you that you're no longer working with automatically selected layers. I can return to normal by going back to layers and clicking Auto Place. Now, let's say I want a path that appears under the water. I can't just move the path layer below the water layer because my bridge is already on that layer, and I want my bridge to stay above the water. Unfortunately, the water is my lowest layer. I could move a different layer down there, but maybe that would mess something else up, right? Well, thanks to your benevolent programmer, this is still in fact a manager. You can make your own layers. Let's call this layer 11 : lower path. It's already at the bottom where I want it. So I select the layer, and now I can place my pathways below the water. If that's not weird enough for me, I can move that layer above the water, but below the edge parts. Okay, here's where you need to be careful. If I delete this layer, then I delete everything that was on that layer. This is a permanent change, so you can't get it back unless you restore a saved backup. As for auto layers, you can't delete them because Platform Builder needs them, but you can still choose clear, which will clear everything off of that layer. So if I clear the water, all the water is gone. All right, you might be wondering, what are layers actually useful for? Everything I demonstrated so far just looked wrong. Well, you'll probably find layers most useful in areas rather than overworlds. So let me go to a pre-made area that shows you how layers could practically work. Here's a simple idea. You can add a layer of ground tiles to go above your character, and then you can use this to hide a secret room in your area. In the course editor, layers also have a few other options. One option is to turn off active. This makes anything on that layer become inactive so that it's only a graphic. Blocks can't be stood on, enemies are frozen. I could also turn on active, but make it invisible. In this case, I can walk on invisible blocks, and the enemies are not visible, but they still hurt me. Here's where it gets really interesting. If you know how to use commands, which is the subject of the next tutorial, you can switch on and off these layers during gameplay. Think about what this means. I could be walking down a hallway, I grab this item, which triggers a command, and the room changes. All that happened was I used commands to turn off visible and active for one layer, and I turned on visible and active for a different layer. So if you make it through the next tutorial, which is all about commands, you'll learn how to do that and a whole lot more.